Hello and welcome to the first lecture of Chapter 8. The title of Chapter 8 is External Flows. And external flows are flows that are not confined by boundaries. So in Chapter 7 we talked about internal flows. So those are flows that are confined by boundaries such as pipe flow. So the two main sections of this chapter are flow around immersed objects and boundary layer flow. So the image you're seeing on the screen is an external flow, or it's the model study of an external flow around the world's tallest building, the Burj Khalifa, which is a skyscraper in Dubai. So it's 828 meters tall, and it's in a wind tunnel, and it's set up on a turntable, and with the construction of any skyscraper, you typically need to do a detailed model study to examine the wind flow in the area around the building and the wind loads on the building. And so this turntable allows them to vary the direction of the wind by just spinning the turntable. So the flows studied or modeled in aeronautical engineering are external flows. The objects are immersed in a fluid, air. The aircraft on the left, the Lockheed Blackbird, as it flies around, it is moving through a fluid. And race cars also move at high speeds through air, so they would be classified as an external flow. And much of what we know about external flows, at least early on, was from aeronautical engineering. With the development of flight in the early 1900s and then the subsequent research on flight related to the two world wars accelerated the field of aeronautical engineering in a big way, and we learned a lot about external flows and in particular about the forces that act on objects as they move through a fluid. Now, some external flows that are more relevant to civil and environmental engineering. Bridge piers are objects that are immersed in rivers, and there's a picture of the high-level bridge. And of course, the river flows in this direction and flows around the bridge piers, so we can think of the flow around that pier as an external flow. Here's a drawing showing Seagen, the world's, at least at the time, the world's only commercially operated tidal turbine. I'm sure there's more now. This image and slide dates back to 2008. So understanding the interaction between the fluid and these structures and the forces the fluid exerts on them is important. Water intakes are structure that is immersed in rivers typically, or it could be in lakes, or well, it wouldn't be in coastal waters, although sometimes we withdraw water from the ocean for cooling purposes. But for drinking water, of course, we're typically withdrawing it from lakes or rivers. This is an example of a water intake, typical configuration of a water intake. This is the so-called pod design. And the way it works is it's installed on the riverbed, and then it's equipped with screens because water intakes must have screens installed on them. Let's try putting that label where we can actually see it here, screens, to prevent fish and other aquatic organisms from being sucked into the water intake. So when they're mounted on the bed of the river like that, there's considerable flow forces on them, and designing them and operating them requires us to know how the fluid and the structure interacts, and in terms of operating them, we need to be able to predict how much water, or what their capacity is in terms of volumetric flow rate. So we'll talk next about flow past a cylinder. right? So what we're going to talk about in terms of flow past a cylinder, at least in qualitative terms, would apply to other shapes. It would certainly apply to flow past a sphere, which is very similar, just three-dimensional flow instead of two. And but even any kind of any so-called blunt object, and we'll talk about what we mean by blunt versus streamlined objects shortly. So here's a diagram that's taken from a textbook similar to our own that shows some sketches of how the flow changes, flow past a cylinder changes as a function of the Reynolds number. So the Reynolds number is the velocity times the diameter of the cylinder divided by the kinematic viscosity. Okay, so if we have a very small Reynolds number, and by small I mean in this case equal to 0.2, so that's an extremely small Reynolds number, the flow pattern looks like what is illustrated here in figure A. There's no separation of the flow, right? A fluid particle that's close to the boundary just sort of flows over and carries on the downstream side. If we increase the Reynolds number a little bit, and in figure B, that would be the Reynolds number equal to 12, we get flow separation, and we get a steady separation bubble. So the steady separation bubble is the region inside that dashed line there. They call it a separation bubble because fluid that is flowing past the cylinder like this separates from the surface of the cylinder and flows off in that direction. So there's actually a couple of points on either side of the cylinder where the flow separates, and we call those separation points. Okay, so in this case there's one there and there's one right there. Okay, if we increase the Reynolds number again by a factor of 10 to 120, then we get the oscillating Kármán vortex street. Sometime, I think previously I might have called it the von Karman vortex street, but I guess it's strictly speaking it's called the Kármán vortex street. And in that flow pattern, vortices are shed alternately from either side of the cylinder and form this very interesting flow pattern. If we increase the Reynolds number up to 30,000, we get the flow illustrated in figure D. So now there's a turbulent wake downstream of the cylinder, and the flow is separating, and in this case the separation points are there. And so in the wake we have turbulent flow, and we may have turbulent flow upstream of the cylinder, or we may not. It just depends. Typically, if you want to achieve a high Reynolds number like that, the flow would typically be turbulent there as well. If we increase the Reynolds number up to 500,000, the separation points move to the rear of the cylinder, and we still have this turbulent wake here. In the case of a Reynolds number equal to 30,000, there's a laminar boundary layer formed on the upstream side of the cylinder. So a boundary layer is the region of the flow close to the boundary where the effects of viscosity are important. We've defined this previously. I believe that was in chapter 3. So if we have a laminar boundary layer, that simply means we're saying that the flow in that region is laminar. When you increase the Reynolds number to 500,000, that flow becomes turbulent. And we'll discuss how to predict whether the flow will be laminar and turbulent in a boundary layer in the second half of the chapter. Here's some flow visualization images showing essentially the same thing. Here we have a Reynolds number of 0.16. So this corresponds to the creeping flow. So they're visualizing the flow using streaks and particles, and we can see that there's no separation of the flow. At a Reynolds number of 2000, we're seeing these vortices be shed. So we could say now we have vortex shedding. The flow is separating, and we have flow separation. And we have what we would call an unsteady wake. Okay, and it looks like that. You might still be seeing a Kármán vortex streak there, but it might not be as orderly and as coherent as it would be at lower Reynolds numbers. At a Reynolds number of 10,000, then we still have vortex shedding. Right? It's a little hard to tell, but that's a vortex there, that's one there, that's one there. But we could say we have probably more turbulence in the wake here. Okay. So here's figure 8.3 from your textbook, which is comparing the flow past a blunt object, which is a cylinder, and a streamlined object, an airfoil. So this is this categorization of objects or bodies in that are immersed in a flow is applicable to high Reynolds numbers flows. So high enough that that a wake is produced, a turbulent wake is produced. So we can see in the case of the cylinder, the flow pattern is similar to what we saw in the previous diagram for a high Reynolds number flow. We have the separated flow region here on the downstream side of the cylinder, right? So the velocity approaching the cylinder is uniform and has a magnitude v. So v, we're calling the free stream velocity. It's the velocity that occurs if you're a little bit away from the cylinder in the region of the flow that's not affected by the cylinder. Okay, so as long as you're outside this dashed region here, that includes the wake on the downstream side and the boundary layer on the upstream side. So LBL is standing for laminar boundary layer. So that's what that acronym means. And TBL is signifying a turbulent boundary layer. Okay. So for a blunt body or object, pressure drag dominates. So we can make a note here that we'll say so-called pressure drag dominates. Okay, let's do it on the other side for streamlined. And streamlined, frictional drag dominates. Okay, so pressure drag is the drag force in the direction of the flow that is created by pressure differences on the upstream and downstream face of the object. Frictional drag is just the net force in the direction of flow that is produced by the action of a shear stress on the surface of the object. Okay. So for both flow fields, we are going to have a stagnation point Okay, the stagnation point on the cylinder is located there. The stagnation point on the airfoil isn't easily located without doing a flow visualization experiment. In this case, it's shown right there. In both cases, we have a boundary layer on the object. So that's the thin layer inside the dashed line that encompasses the region where the effects of viscosity are important. If you get far enough away from the object, like out here next to this little label, you would have inviscid flow. Okay? Both objects produce a wake. The wake, in the case of the blunt object, is quite a bit wider, right? And so it encompasses this whole region. And then something to note here is that this reduction in velocity here, that's referred to as a velocity defect. So that's the reduction in velocity produced by the presence of the object, okay? And both objects produce this velocity defect, okay? The blunt body flow field has flow separation occurring, okay? We don't see flow separation on the airfoil, at least at the angle it's at here. We have a separated flow region. I'll just call that the separated region, like it's labeled in the figure. And in the blunt object case, we are going to have a large pressure drag. Okay. In a blunt object, frictional drag is still occurring. It's just that the pressure drag is much greater than that. And we could say the same for a streamlined object. Pressure drag is still occurring, but now the frictional drag is much larger than the pressure drag. So you might imagine that not all objects can be classified as blunt or streamlined. There's going to be some shaped objects in between that are neither blunt or streamlined, and those would be objects in which the pressure drag and the frictional drag are of the same order of magnitude. Okay? The ultimate streamlined object would be created if we took this airfoil and we squished it into a thin flat plate. Okay? And I guess you could say the ultimate blunt object would actually be, well, a cylinder is actually pretty blunt, but if we squished it into a plate that was perpendicular to flow, okay, then it would have a plate that's perpendicular to the flow. There's no frictional drag generated in the direction of flow, only a big pressure drag. And for a flat plate that's aligned with the flow, there's no pressure drag, only the frictional drag, okay?